Before the First Age was counted, before the lands of Middle-earth bore the weight of kingdoms or the sorrow of war, the world lay beneath a sky lit only by the glow of the two trees. Time was not measured in years, but in the golden and silver rhythms that radiated across the blessed realm. It was an age between creation and destiny, a quiet breath in Arda's unfolding, when the world waited for the children of Ilúvatar to awaken. The Valar, dwelling in Valinor beyond the shadowy seas, governed their realm in harmony. Yet beyond their shores stretched the vast lands of Middle-earth, darkened and wounded by Melkor's rebellion. Though bound in chains after the Battle of the Powers, the scars of his malice remained. Forests twisted by frost, plains broken by upheaval, mountains raised in sudden violent peaks. And though Melkor had been cast into the void, his influence lingered like a memory carved into stone. The Valar walked the quiet gardens of Valinor, shaping beauty in the shadow of the mountains of Aman. The two trees, Telperion and Laurelin, shimmered softly, bathing the land in alternating hues, silver deep and gold warm. Under their light, peace seemed eternal. But Ilúvatar had spoken of a coming marvel, one greater even than the Valar, the children who would awaken in Middle-earth, beyond the reach of the trees, beneath the vast canopy of unlit stars. They were called the Firstborn, the Quendi, yet none among the Valar knew the hour or the place of their arising. They watched, waited, and wondered. Varda, the star kindler, prepared the heavens for their arrival. With patient grace, she set new stars blazing in the sky, constellations full of meaning and promise. In the far north, she wrought Menelmacar, a sign of strength. In the west, she lifted Valasirka, the sickle of the Valar, a warning against the shadow that once defied them. In the quiet hours of silver light, her stars glimmered like ancient promises, waking beauty within the deeps of Middle-earth. The world waited. And then, at last, along the shores of Lake Cuiviénen, far east beyond the sight of the Valar, the Elves awakened. It was a moment unlike any since the dawning of the two trees. A stillness fell over the land, as if Arda itself held its breath. Beneath the starlit sky, the first Elves opened their eyes to a world vast and shadowed, rich and mysterious. They were tall and bright of spirit, with wonder in their hearts and the music of creation faintly echoing in their voices. They gazed upward into Varda's constellations and knew instinctively that they had been created for this world. They heard the whisper of waters, the rustle of wind in young forests, and the trembling of starlight over the lake. Each sound was new. Each sensation, cold air, soft earth, the scented breath of leaves, was a miracle. The Elves began to name all things, for language awakened in them like a flame. Water they named Nen, stars they called Eleni, and themselves, Quendi, the speakers. They explored the forests surrounding the lake, marveling at every stone, every root, every thread of grass. In their hearts grew a quiet longing, a desire to understand their place in the unfolding world. The Valar did not yet know of their arrival, but Melkor knew. Even from distant imprisonment, the echo of their awakening touched the memory of his malice. In ages past, he had roamed Middle-earth, carving dark pits, raising mountains, and pouring ice over fertile lands. He alone knew the hidden corners where shadows had seeped so deeply that even the Valar could not easily find them. And so, before the Valar discovered the Firstborn, Melkor's creatures found them first. Strange shapes moved through the deep woods near Cuiviénen. Shadows under the boughs, quiet and patient. Wolves twisted by old hate, spirits wrapped in forms of terror. The elves felt the presence of watchers, eyes gleaming from darkness, following their steps. The Quendi grew wary, and some whispered fear of Hunter in the night, a figure that stole into camps and left them diminished. Many would later believe these shadows were Melkor's servants, seeking to capture or corrupt the firstborn. The Valar, hearing distant rumors carried by the winds and waters of Arda, began to search the lands beyond Aman. Ulmo, Lord of the Waters, wandered the seas and rivers, seeking the children whose coming Varda's stars foretold. It was Ulmo who first heard their voices in the murmuring of waters and sensed their wonder and fear. He returned to Valinor and stood before the council of the Valar. "The children awake," he said, "and they are fair beyond our imagining." Joy stirred among the powers, yet dread followed swiftly. For if the children were awake, Melkor's shadow must surely stir as well. A council gathered at the Ring of Doom beneath the mountain of Taniquetil, where Manwë often communed with Ilúvatar's winds. There the Valar debated their course. Should they go to the children, or should the children come to them? Should they bring them into the west, beyond the reach of shadow, or protect them in their birthplace beneath the stars? But the choice could not wait, for Ulmo's voice, deep as oceans, warned them. Melkor's creatures walk near the Quendi. If we do not act, he will claim them. Thus the Valar resolved to confront Melkor once more, not for their own sake, but for the children of Ilúvatar. A great war began, the Battle of the Powers, fought across Middle-earth in an age before men awoke or the sun rose. Mountains shook beneath the force of their conflict. Rivers changed their paths. Caverns cracked open under thunderous strokes of divine contest. The Valar sought to drive Melkor from his hidden strongholds, the fortress of Utumno and the dark pits of Angband. After long struggle, Melkor was seized and brought bound in chains before the throne of Manwë. There, beneath the light of the two trees, he was sentenced to long imprisonment, 3 ages of the trees. Bound in the halls of Mandos, he could not trouble Middle-earth for a time. With Melkor subdued, the Valar turned at last toward the firstborn. They walked the long shores of Middle-earth, their presence quiet and luminous. When the elves beheld them, awe and confusion stirred in their hearts. For the Valar appeared like ancient giants, shaped from starlight and power. 3 lords among the elves came forward: Ingwe, Finwë, and Elwë, leaders of the clans that would one day shape the fate of Middle-earth. They listened as the Valar spoke of the world's creation, of the shadow that had hunted them, and of the peace that awaited in the west beneath the light of the 2 trees. The elves were divided. Some longed to walk beside these mighty beings and behold the blessed realm. Others feared leaving their birthplace. Many felt the pull of the unmoving stars overhead. In the end, the 3 lords agreed to journey westward with the Valar, crossing mountains, plains, and shores, until at last they reached Valinor. There, the radiance of the 2 trees overwhelmed them. The elves beheld beauty so profound that even their immortal hearts trembled. Thus began the great journey, the long migration of the elves from Cuivianen toward the Blessed Realm. Some followed eagerly, drawn by hope and the awakening joy of new horizons. Others lingered in the east, reluctant or fearful. A few wandered into forests and rivers far from the path, becoming the ancestors of many elven kindreds. The journey was long, marked by marvels and dangers. The Teleri, led by Elwë and Olwë, were slow to depart, for they loved the sound of waters and the peace of starlit shores. The Vanyar and the Noldor marched swiftly, guided by their leaders Ingwe and Finwë. At last, after many trials, the first two hosts reached the shores of the Great Sea. Ulmo returned with waves that echoed ancient music. The elves climbed upon an island he shaped with his own power, and he drew them across the waters to the west, bearing them safely to Valinor. There the Vanir and Noldor settled, taking residence in the shadow of the trees. The Teleri, lingering in Middle-earth, were delayed, and their fate took a different path. Thus, the First Age was set alight, not by sun or moon, for they were not yet born, but by the shimmering gold and silver light of Valinor, and by the awakening hearts of the elves who would shape the history of all ages to come. But even in peace, destiny stirs. And beyond the mountains of Aman, the world of Middle-earth waited for the great tales of sorrow, beauty, and unending courage that would one day echo across ages. The First Age had begun. The awakening of the elves at Cuiviénen was a dawn unlike any other in Arda's long memory. Under starlit skies, they danced upon the shores of that quiet lake, marveling at the sound of water and the shimmer of constellations reflected upon its surface. But destiny, once set in motion, seldom stands still. The world was vast, and the firstborn were meant to walk paths far beyond their birthplace. The Valar, having defeated Melkor in the Battle of the Powers, turned their full attention toward the children of Ilúvatar. Their hearts mingled with wonder and concern, for though Middle-earth was beautiful, it still bore deep wounds. Chasms of black rock, forests chilled by ancient frost, rivers whose course had been twisted by the wars of divine might. And though Melkor was locked in the halls of Mandos, echoes of his malice remained in the dark places of the world. Manwë, Lord of Air and Winds, watched Middle-earth from the heights of Taniquetil. He felt the trembling of young hearts beneath the stars and knew that fear would find them again unless the Valar intervened. Varda, standing beside him, gazed upon the constellations she herself had kindled and whispered, "We must guide them, for they do not yet understand the shadow that hunted them." Thus began the greatest movement of the First Age, the great journey of the elves, a migration that would shape the fates of kingdoms yet unbuilt and stories yet unsung. When the Valar first revealed themselves to the elves, awe swept through the three clans that had formed around Cuiviénen. The Minyar, swift and eager, the Tatyar, curious and bold, and the Neliar, gentle and numerous. To guide them, the Valar chose three among the wisest and most noble of their number. Ingwe, whose heart was quiet and full of clarity. Finwë, whose spirit shone with deep fire. Elwë, whose voice carried the beauty of starlight. These three, accepting the summons of the Valar, agreed to journey westward as representatives of their people. Their departure from Cuiviénen marked the first true step into history, a crossing from the innocence of awakening into the long path of destiny. The journey was long. Mountains rose like giants in their way, and forests stirred with ancient whispers. Yet the Valar guided them gently, shielding them from lingering shadows. At last the ambassadors reached the western shores of Middle-earth, where the sea met the land with a vast, rolling sigh. There, at the edge of the world, they beheld Ulmo rising from the depths. Cloaked in foam and crowned with waves, he regarded them with a gaze both ancient and deep. With a voice like distant thunder softened by rain, he beckoned them onto an island shaped by his own will. Upon that island, the three lords were ferried across the great sea. The ambassadors stood in silence as Valinor rose before them. No tale told in later ages could fully describe that moment. The gentle silver of Telperion washing over crystal fountains. The golden radiance of Lorelin spilling across green fields and white-walled cities. To the elves of Cuiviénen, accustomed only to starlight, The two trees were a marvel beyond dreaming, their hearts filled with a longing so deep, so resonant, that destiny reshaped itself within them. The Valar welcomed them with quiet reverence. The ambassadors wandered through the gardens of Lorien, where dream and memory intertwined. They walked along the shores of Eldamar, where the sea lay still beneath shimmering dawn. They beheld the glory of the Valar in their home, unshadowed by war or malice. When the time came to return east, Ingwe, Finwë, and Elwë carried a message in their hearts. A summons for all elves to come into the west, to dwell in safety beneath the trees and learn wisdom from the powers. When the ambassadors returned to Cuivianen, they spoke of what they had seen, of gardens untouched by shadow, of mountains crowned with everlasting light, of a world where Melkor's hand could not reach. Their words stirred many hearts. Some heard the call of the West as a promise, a fulfillment of the longing placed within them at their awakening. Others hesitated, fearing the unknown. A few felt no pull at all, content beneath the open sky and the reflection of stars upon the waters. Thus began the first great sundering of the Elves. Those who chose to follow the ambassadors westward were named the Eldar, a word given by Orome, meaning people of the stars. They were divided into three kindreds: the Vanir, led by Ingwe, lovers of the Valar, radiant and serene; the Noldor, led by Finwë, seekers of knowledge, craft, and deep thought; the Teleri, led by Elwë and Olwë, lovers of water, beauty, and song; the Avari, those who refused the summons. Yet many refused the journey. Some feared leaving the lands of their birth. Some distrusted the Valar. Others simply loved Cuivianen and the starlit world. These elves became the Avari, the unwilling, who remained in Middle-earth and whose songs would later become quiet and strange, scattered across far-flung forests and shadowed glades. Thus, the First Age had barely begun, and yet the elves were already dividing into paths that would echo through every age that followed. With Orome leading them, the Eldar set forth from the eastern lands. It was a journey of great distance, through plains lit by starlight, over hills that whispered of ancient battles, across rivers that carried the memory of creation. The Vanir moved swiftly, eager for the light. The Noldor followed, filled with questions and wonder. The Teleri, ever slower, tarried by every lake and river, for the sound of water wove itself into their hearts. Not all who began the journey would reach its end. Some of the Teleri grew weary and settled in forests along the way, becoming the Nandor. Others, reaching the foothills of distant mountains, turned aside, their hearts captured by the green, misty veils. But destiny marched on, and the Eldar pressed westward. The crossing of the misty mountains was a trial unlike any before. Jagged peaks loomed overhead, remnants of the wars between the Valar and Melkor. Snow clung to the highest crags, and winds whistled through narrow passes. Orome guided them, his great horn echoing through valleys. When wolves prowled in the dark, he scattered them with thunderous sound. When sudden storms blocked their path, he raised his hand, and the winds parted. Still, the journey tested them. Many among the Teleri faltered, yet their love for Elwë and Olwë kept them moving. Songs of hope drifted through the cold air, soft and haunting. At last the Eldar descended into a wide land of rolling plains and clear rivers, a place later known as Eredor, where peace lingered like a gentle breath. There they rested, gazing toward the distant horizons where the sea lay hidden. It is said among the Eldar that no heart can fully prepare for its first sight of the sea. When at last the Eldar reached the western edge of Middle-earth, they heard the roar of waves before they saw the water. The sound was deep and ancient, like a voice calling across ages. The Vanyar and Noldor approached with wonder. But the Teleri, when they beheld the sea, their hearts awakened. The waters spoke to them in a way nothing had before. Many fell to their knees, overcome by its beauty. Its rhythm stirred their voices into new songs, songs of longing, songs of farewell, songs woven from the breath of the wind and the pulse of the tides. This was the birth of their identity, a connection so deep that the sea would forever be their joy and sorrow. But their journey was not yet complete. Upon the western shores, Orome summoned Ulmo. And Ulmo, Lord of the Deep, rose from the waves in majesty. He shaped a vast island from the sea's own bones, lifting it from the depths with swirling foam. The Vanyar and Noldor boarded the island first. With a single motion, Ulmo drew it westward, ferrying them across the great sea. As the waters parted, the stars shimmered above, guiding them toward the light of the two trees. When they reached Valinor, the Vanyar chose to dwell closest to the trees, forever bathed in their radiance. The Noldor settled in Tirion upon Tuna, crafting halls of white stone and towers that gleamed like starlight. Their lives blossomed in beauty and knowledge, untouched by sorrow. But the Teleri, arriving late and tarrying long in Middle-earth, faced their own trials, and their fate would be written by a moment of wonder yet to unfold. As the Teleri journeyed westward, Elwë, greatest among their leaders, wandered into the forests of Eriador. There he encountered Melian, a Maya of Lorien, whose voice carried the memory of ancient light. In the twilight of that forest, the two beheld one another, and in that instant time fell still. The Teleri searched long for their missing lord, calling his name through valleys and rivers. But Elwë did not return. He stood entranced with Melian, and the world around them faded into a dream woven of starlight and fate. Without their leader, the Teleri faltered. Some wished to remain and wait for Elwë's return. Others longed for Valinor. Olwe, Elwë's brother, took leadership of those who chose to continue the journey. But the absence of Elwë, later known as Elu Thingol, greatest of the Sindar, cast a shadow across their hearts. And so the great journey divided them once more. The first age was no longer simply a beginning. It was a tapestry of choices, losses, and longings. A path shaped by wonder and shadow alike. And though the Valar sought to guide the firstborn into safety, destiny was already weaving tales that would echo across all the ages to come. The great journey had carried the Vanyar and Noldor safely into the Blessed Realm, where silver and gold mingled in the light of the two trees. But the Teleri, the last and largest of the three hosts, remained scattered along the vast western lands of Middle-earth. Their hearts were stretched between two great longings. The longing for the sea, whose voice called to them endlessly, and the longing for their lost lord, Elwë, whose absence weighed upon them like a deep and ancient sorrow. Thus began the slowest and most fragmented chapter of the Eldar's migration. The parting of the Teleri into many branches, each guided by destiny's gentle but unyielding hand. Elwë, wandering beneath the tall beeches of Nan Elmoth, beheld Melian the Maya as moonlight fell upon the glade. There was no movement of breeze, no sound of branch or leaf, only the stillness of a moment suspended beyond time. The starlight wrapped around them like a veil, and in their meeting, a bond was forged unlike any other in Arda. Elwë stood entranced, caught in a vision of a beauty older than the world. Melian, gentle and serene, beheld in him the first light of the children of Ilúvatar. Together they lingered in a quiet dream, and the forest around them became a sanctuary untouched by passing years. Outside that enchanted glade, the Teleri searched tirelessly. Their voices echoed through valleys and across lakes, calling their beloved lord's name. But no answer returned. Some believed Elwë lost forever, taken by shadow or swallowed by the very forest he cherished. Others hoped he still wandered somewhere beyond their reach. Yet the truth lay hidden in stillness and song, where the world held its breath for a love that would shape all future histories of Beleriand. Without Elwë, the Teleri faced a heavy choice: remain and continue the search, or continue westward toward the promise of Valinor. Their hearts were torn, and so the kindred divided. Many refused to abandon their king. They stayed behind, searching the forests and shores, singing laments that drifted into the night. Over time, they settled in the lands later known as Beleriand. Beneath the tapestry of stars, these elves became the Sindar, the Grey Elves, led eventually by Elwë, now called Thingol, and Melian, who would become queen beside him. Their people would shape Beleriand's beauty, crafting realms of song and starlight. Others, though grieving, trusted that Elwë's fate was bound to a higher purpose. Under the guidance of Olwë, they continued the journey westward. Their steps were slow, for the sea called to them with increasing power. To these elves, water was not only a barrier to Valinor, but a teacher, a companion. They walked along its shores for many years, learning its rhythms, crafting new songs inspired by its voice. Their music became soft and flowing, shaped by the whisper of waves and the sigh of the tide. They would become the Teleri of Aman, the last host to reach Valinor, whose love for the sea would forever set them apart. The westernmost lands of Middle-earth stretched before the Teleri in timeless quiet. Forests of deep green rolled toward distant mountains. Rivers, young and clear, carved silver paths across the land. And far beyond, the roaring sea cast white foam upon dark shores. Here the Teleri lingered for many years. They built camps along the estuaries of Sirion and settled on the Falas, coastal regions filled with seabirds and windswept grasses. As they waited for the Valar to return, they learned to master the tide, shaping rafts and boats from driftwood and tall reeds. It was in these days that the Teleri befriended Ossa, a Maya of the sea who served Ulmo. Osse loved the wide waters of Arda, and though his heart sometimes stormed with wildness, he held the Teleri in great affection. He taught them the swell of the waves, the voice of the deep, and the song of the wind across the sea. Many Teleri grew so enamored with the western coasts that they begged to remain there forever. Their hearts were bound to the sea's unending rhythm, and Ulmo, hearing their longing, allowed it. These elves became the Falathrim, the elves of the Falas, later guided by the wise lord Círdan the Shipwright. Thus the Teleri divided once more, each branch shaped by the sea in its own way. When at last the Valar called Ulmo to bring the Teleri to Valinor, he rose from the deep with the quiet grace of a gathering tide. He invited the host to board the same island ferry he had once used to bring the Vanir and Noldor across the Great Sea. But many Teleri, bound now to the coasts by friendship with Osse and their love for the sea, hesitated. They begged Ulmo for more time, their hearts aching with conflicting desire. And so Ulmo, whose compassion ran deeper than oceans, allowed them a delay. Only the principal host under Olwë boarded the island. With great solemnity, Ulmo drew it once more into the west. Stars glimmered above, reflecting on the waves as the island drifted like a pale dream across the sea. The Teleri wept softly as Middle-earth's shores receded into the horizon. Their songs rose into the night, songs of farewell and hope, songs as delicate as moonlight upon water. When they reached the Blessed Realm, they joined their kin in the light of the two trees. Yet, even in Valinor, their hearts were drawn to the sea that had cradled their journey. They became the greatest mariners of the Elves, crafting white ships that shimmered like pearl under Telperion's glow. Meanwhile, in Middle-earth, destiny unfolded around the love-struck glade of Nan Elmoth. Elwë awoke from his trance, though to him no time had passed. He gazed into Melian's eyes and knew that the path of the west was no longer his to walk. She smiled, the memory of ancient ages reflected in her gaze, and spoke softly of the world yet to come. Together they left the forest and returned to the Elves, who had waited so long for their lord. Awe fell upon the Sindar when they beheld him, for he now bore a subtle radiance, as if touched by a fragment of the tree's glory. Melian walked beside him, her presence quiet and profound. She became a queen among the Sindar, guiding them with wisdom far beyond the reach of mortal time. Under their rule, the Sindar built a kingdom called Doriath, the Hidden Land. Melian wove around it an enchanted barrier, the Girdle of Melian, which no foe could cross without her leave. Beneath her protection, the forests deepened, the rivers ran clear, and the stars shone with renewed brilliance. The Sindar grew in wisdom and beauty. Their songs drifted through the trees like silver echoes. They carved halls beneath the forest of Neldoreth and crafted realms lit by starlight alone. Though they had never seen the light of the two trees, a faint echo of that radiance lived in their hearts through Melian's presence. Thus, the Grey Elves became the greatest people of Middle-earth during the early First Age. With Melkor imprisoned, the world knew a rare peace. Mountains rose gently across Middle-earth, shaped now by the quiet labor of Olë and the patience of Yavanna. Rivers carved new paths, enriched by Ulmo's deep music. Forests spread across the land, vast and green, nurtured by the breath of Este and the dreams of Lorien. Beleriand emerged as a realm of deep valleys and highlands, of clear rivers and shadowed forests. It would become the heart of the First Age, its kingdoms, wars, and tragedies shaping all future ages. In the north, beyond the peaceful lands, the remains of Angband and Utumno lay broken. Smoke still drifted faintly from deep pits, remnants of Melkor's once terrible dominion. But even in ruin, these dark places whispered of the shadow that would one day return. Yet in the early days of the First Age, the world held its breath in peace. The Sindar flourished in Doriath. The Green Elves, formerly the Nandor, settled along the Anduin and later in Osiriand, the land of seven rivers. Círdan and the Falathrim crafted ships along the western shores, their masts rising against the starlit sky. In Valinor, the Vanyar, Noldor, and Teleri lived in harmony beneath the trees. The world seemed whole, unmarred by discord. But beneath the stillness, destiny stirred. For though Melkor remained imprisoned, the seeds of future sorrow already lay waiting, shaped by pride, by longing, and by the relentless passage of ages. The First Age had begun in peace. But it would not remain so. The First Age unfolded like a quiet dawn over Arda. Melkor, once the terror of all lands, lay imprisoned in the halls of Mandos. His shadow no longer crossed the mountains, nor chilled the forests with sudden frost. Under the gentle glow of the two trees, the Eldar in Valinor flourished in peace. And yet, as often happens in ages of great beauty, it was within the tranquil heart of bliss that the first threads of future sorrow were quietly spun. For though the Valar had offered the Eldar a sanctuary free from shadow, the children of Ilúvatar were not shaped for stillness alone. Within them lived a spark of curiosity, longing, and restless desire. A reflection of the great music that had given them form. As the Teleri completed their long journey to Valinor, the Blessed Realm welcomed them with shimmering warmth. The Vanir and Noldor were the first to greet them, their cities and gardens glowing beneath the alternating silver and gold light of Telperion and Lorelin. The Teleri, overwhelmed by the majesty of the trees, fell silent in reverence. Their hearts, long bound to the sea, found new beauty in this land where light itself breathed in steady rhythm. Ulmo, sensing their ache for the waves they had left behind, shaped for them the bays and harbors of Eldamar, the elven home. The Teleri settled along the coast, raising white ships of pearl and mithril that shone like fragments of moonlight upon the sea. Among them, Olwe became a beloved leader, wise and steadfast. Their craft grew to unmatched mastery, and they filled the western shores with songs soft as sea foam. The Vanir, serene and closest to the Valar, dwelt near the trees, basking in the unshadowed radiance of both lights. Their voices rose in hymns that echoed through Valinor like threads of silver wind. The Noldor, curious, bold, and full of eager thought, built the towers of Tirion upon Tuna, where high white walls gleamed under the mingling lights. Their workshops and halls brimmed with creativity and invention. For the Noldor delighted in craft as others delighted in song. And at the heart of Valinor, the Valar walked among them like quiet guardians. Peace touched every hill, every fountain, every starlit path. The world seemed held in gentle hands. Yet it was in Tirion that the first stirrings of unease began to take root. Among the Noldor was a prince whose spirit burned brighter than any of his kin. Fëanor, son of Finwë and Miriel. From his earliest years, he shone with a fierce brilliance, quick of mind, swift of craft, and relentless in pursuit of mastery. The fire of creativity that Ilúvatar had woven into the firstborn blazed in him with unmatched intensity. It was Fëanor who crafted gems that captured the colors of sunrise and twilight. Fëanor who shaped runes of power and deep meaning. Fëanor who studied the tongues of all elves and refined them into new forms of beauty. But Fëanor's greatest creations, and the seeds of the greatest tragedy to ever befall the elves, were yet to come. For though he lived in bliss beneath the trees, his heart carried an unease that stirred like embers beneath ash. Miriel, his mother, had passed from life, her spirit so exhausted by the effort of bearing him that she departed to the halls of Mandos. Fëanor grew up without her warmth, raised in the shadow of her absence. And though Finwë loved him dearly, a quiet emptiness lingered in the prince's soul. This emptiness would shape all the ages that followed. Finwë, king of the Noldor, loved his son with the depth of an immortal heart. But in time, he took a second wife, Indis of the Vanir, a queen serene and gentle. Their union brought forth new children, Fingolfin and Finarfin, noble princes in their own right. The court of Tirion rejoiced at these new lives. Songs floated through crystalline halls, and laughter filled the streets. But Fëanor, brilliant and proud, felt his father's attention divided. He did not hate Fingolfin or Finarfin, yet he viewed their presence as a reminder of loss. His mother gone, his father's heart divided, his place no longer singular. Thus began a subtle rivalry, quiet at first, then growing, like the faint tremor before a mountain shakes itself free. Fingolfin, wise and strong-hearted, admired Fëanor and sought only peace. But Fëanor saw in Fingolfin a challenger, though none had raised a hand against him. This discord, small though it seemed, would one day bloom into catastrophe. It was during an age of introspection and creative fervor that Fëanor achieved a work beyond anything ever wrought by Elf or Vala. He captured the mingled light of Telperion and Lorelin, the silver dew and golden glow, and bound them within 3 radiant jewels. Their beauty surpassed all gems under heaven. They seemed alive, for within them dwelt the unmarred memory of the first light of Arda. These jewels were named the Silmarils. So dazzling were they that Varda herself hallowed them, declaring that no unclean hand could touch them without being burned. Ole marveled at their craftsmanship. The Noldor rejoiced, for the light within the Silmarils awakened memories of creation itself. But most deeply, they awakened pride. Pride in Fëanor, pride in the Noldor, pride in the unmatched beauty that could be forged by elven hands. The Silmarils became the heart of Fëanor's spirit. He guarded them with fierce devotion. He spoke seldom of their inner workings. He trusted few with the knowledge of their making. In time, this devotion would burn hotter than wisdom could contain. Meanwhile, the years of Melkor's imprisonment came to an end. He stood before Manwë in the courts of Valmar, feigning repentance. His words were soft, his demeanor humble. Many among the Valar believed his transformation sincere, for they sought harmony above all things. And though Mandos spoke a warning, he shall yet cause sorrow greater than any you can foresee. Manwë, in mercy, released Melkor from bondage. Melkor walked once more beneath the light of the trees, and though the radiance pained him, he hid his bitterness beneath smiles and soft words. He went among the Noldor, speaking of freedom, of mastery, of realms beyond the reach of the Valar. He whispered of Middle-earth, of lands untouched by their guardianship, where the Noldor could reign as kings. Many ignored him, but some listened, and one listened most deeply, Fëanor. Melkor, master of lies, wove his influence like a shadow creeping between the roots of a great tree. He whispered that the Valar kept the Elves captive in Valinor, that Middle-earth belonged rightfully to the Firstborn, that the Silmarils, in all their glory, should not be hidden away in the vaults of the highest towers. He spoke of greatness and destiny. He spoke of crowns and kingdoms. He spoke of power. And the Noldor, ever hungry for knowledge and mastery, felt their hearts stir. Not all believed him. Finarfin turned away with quiet wisdom. Fingolfin listened with caution, recognizing danger in Melkor's voice. But Fëanor, already restless, already proud, was drawn to Melkor's words like tinder to a flame. Division grew in Tirion. Whispers filled the white halls. Even the sound of hammers in the forges took on a tense, hurried cadence. The peace of Valinor trembled. Though Melkor's influence had spread, it was Fëanor who gave shape to the unrest. He began crafting weapons, swords and spears, sharp and gleaming beneath the light of the trees. For though the Eldar had no need of war, Fëanor feared betrayal and raised arms to protect the Silmarils. He confronted Fingolfin in wrathful pride, believing him a rival for Finwë's throne. Words sharp as blades passed between them, and kin looked upon kin with mistrust. The Valar summoned Fëanor to judgment. There, in the Ring of Doom, they confronted him with Melkor's lies. And Fëanor, seeing his folly, withdrew in shame. But the damage had been done. The Noldor were divided. Their hearts stirred with restlessness, and Melkor, though discovered, escaped, fleeing Valinor's light, vanishing into the shadows beyond the mountains of Aman. Fëanor was banished from Tirion and went to dwell with Finwë in the northern fortress of Formenos, taking the Silmarils with him. Fingolfin remained in Tirion, ruling in his father's stead, though sorrow weighed upon his shoulders. The unity of the Noldor, once shining and strong, had fractured. And in that fracture, the seeds of tragedy were sown. The First Age had begun with peace. But now, at its heart, a quiet storm gathered. One that would soon darken the heavens, shatter kingdoms, and set the course for all the ages to come. Peace in Valinor, though long and radiant, was never destined to endure forever. For even beneath the glow of the two trees, light pure and unmarred since the dawn of the world, shadows had begun to stir. Fëanor brooded in Formenos, his Silmarils locked away in secret chambers. Fingolfin ruled uneasily in Tirion, striving to mend the divisions among his people. And Melkor, once bound in the halls of Mandos, now wandered the world beyond the mountains of Aman, nursing hatred deeper than the roots of the earth. The Valar hoped that harmony might one day be restored, but Ilúvatar had set into motion ages too vast for even the wise to foresee. The Bliss of Valinor was only a chapter in the story of Arda, and the first notes of sorrow were already beginning to sound. When Melkor fled Valinor, he traveled north into the shadows beyond the Pelori Mountains. There, in deep chasms, where no Vala walked and no star shone, dwelled a being older than many realms, darker than the void itself. Ungoliant, the great spider. Her origins were uncertain. Some say she came from beyond Arda, birthed from the darkness that lay outside creation. Others believed she was once a Maya, now corrupted beyond recognition. Her hunger was endless, devouring light wherever it shone, leaving behind only black webs and thick, blinding darkness. Melkor approached her lair, cloaked in secrecy, and there he made a pact. He promised her all the light she could drink, all the radiance she could consume, if she would aid him in his vengeance against the Valar. Ungoliant considered him with eyes like bottomless pits. Then, in a voice that hissed like rotting leaves, she whispered, "Swear it." And Melkor swore. Ungoliant cloaked them in a shroud of impenetrable darkness, a void so absolute that even the keen sight of the Valar could not pierce it. Together they crept south, descending from the mountains and moving silently through the fields of Valinor. The hour of their vengeance was close. In those days, the Valar sought to mend the rift among the Noldor. Manwë, noble and compassionate, called for a great festival in Valmar, inviting all peoples to gather in harmony. The Vanir, Noldor, and Teleri came from their cities, bringing music and gifts. Lanterns shone with soft hues. Laughter echoed across green fields. Even Fëanor, still in exile, was summoned. And to the wonder of many, he came. Finwë remained behind at Formenos to guard the Silmarils, but Fëanor walked toward Valmar with a cautious heart, hoping that perhaps the bitterness of past years might be healed. In the golden hour of Laurelin's full bloom, Fingolfin approached Fëanor with a gesture of peace. He offered his hand and spoke words of reconciliation, declaring "As I promised, I will follow you. May no shadow come between us again." Those who witnessed the moment believed a new dawn had come for the Noldor. But far above them, unseen, Melkor and Ungoliant crept ever closer. As the festival unfolded, the Valar prepared to bless the gathering. Varda stood beside the roots of the trees, her hands raised in quiet benediction. Yavanna touched the trunks with gentle reverence. The mingling light washed over the land in waves of gold and silver, pure, serene, eternal. Then the sky fell to black. Ungoliant's darkness poured across the fields like a storm of void. Light vanished. Voices faltered. Confusion rippled through the assembly. Melkor, striking with swift violence, drove a spear into the heart of Telperion, piercing its silver core. Ungoliant leapt upon the wounded tree, drinking its light with ravenous hunger. Laurelin trembled as Melkor slashed its trunk, and Ungoliant drank its golden fire until the very last drop was extinguished. The land of Valinor fell into total darkness. The Valar, overwhelmed and unprepared, stood in stunned silence. The air was thick with a black fog so dense that even the stars above were swallowed. And then, in the emptiness, Ungoliant turned toward Melkor. Her hunger had grown beyond desire. Now it ruled her utterly. She demanded more light, more radiance, more treasure, more life. Melkor, fearing the monstrous shadow he had unleashed, fled northward. Ungoliant pursued him, her webs of darkness stretching across valleys and mountains. Only when he reached the remnants of his ancient stronghold at Angband did Melkor escape her wrath. Calling upon the Balrogs, creatures of fire and shadow, to drive her off. Ungoliant fled into the deep south, and Melkor claimed the victory he had long awaited. But his vengeance was not yet complete. Even as Valinor reeled from the death of the trees, Melkor surged northward with renewed fury and malice. He reached Formenos, where Finwë, faithful and unyielding, guarded his son's treasures. Fëanor had left his father behind, believing Valinor safe. He could not know that the greatest villain of the world would reach Formenos before news could travel. Finwë confronted Melkor alone. He did not flee, he did not bow, he did not yield. Melkor struck him down, and Finwë became the first to die by violence in Valinor. Then Melkor broke into the vaults of Formenos, and with hands twisted by shadow and spite, he seized the Silmarils. The jewels burned him, for Varda's blessing allowed no impure hand to touch them. But Melkor bore the pain with terrible joy, for the Silmarils were now his, stolen from the heart of the one who loved them most. He wrapped the jewels in black rags, covering their radiance, and fled into the night. The First Age would never be the same. Word reached Valmar like a storm. The trees were dead, their light extinguished. Finwë had been slain. The Silmarils were gone. Fëanor, overwhelmed by grief and wrath, stood in the darkened ring of Valmar as the Valar pleaded for unity. He refused their counsel. His soul was aflame with sorrow, pride, and the fierce love he bore for his father and his jewels. In that hour of shadow, he spoke words that would echo through all ages. This grief and wrong the Valar have not endured, but we shall. In our oath, we bind ourselves to pursue with vengeance any who keeps or takes the Silmarils, Vela, elf, or mortal. Be he friend or foe, good or evil, until the end of days. His sons pressed their swords to their hearts and repeated the vow. And so was forged the oath of Fëanor. A terrible silence fell afterward, for the Valar understood the doom such words carried. And the Noldor understood that fate had turned its gaze upon them. Fëanor called upon the Noldor to reclaim their treasures and their freedom. He spoke of Middle-earth, lands vast and unruled, lands where the Valar held no dominion. He accused the Valar of keeping the Elves captive in bliss, preventing them from fulfilling their destiny. Many Noldor, inflamed by grief and pride, followed him, but not all. Finarfin counseled peace, urging patience and wisdom. Fingolfin sought unity, torn between loyalty to his brother and loyalty to Valinor. Their people were divided, hearts burdened by grief and anger. In the end, the majority chose to depart. They marched northward beneath the darkened sky, the light of the trees only a memory behind them. The Valar pleaded with them to remain, warning of suffering and doom. Mandos, shrouded in shadow, spoke a prophecy of sorrow. Tears unnumbered ye shall shed. But the Noldor pressed on. They reached the shores of the far north, where the sea lay frozen and black. There they confronted the Teleri at Alqualond, demanding their ships. The Teleri, who had come to love the sea as their home, refused. In rage and desperation, the Noldor attacked. The first kinslaying spilled blood upon the white shores. Thus the Noldor passed into exile, burdened by tragedy, driven by an oath that bound them to shadow. At last, the exiled Noldor set foot upon Middle-earth once more, divided by hardship, strengthened by grief, and bound to a destiny no power could unweave. Behind them lay a land of light extinguished. Before them lay a world waiting for heroes, tragedies, and legends, yet unwritten. And in the north, beneath iron mountains, Melkor, now named Morgoth, the black foe of the world, crowned himself in fire and shadow, the Silmarils burning painfully in his iron crown. Thus, the First Age truly began. An age of exile and courage, sorrow and glory, where the greatest stories of the Elves would unfold beneath the cold light of newborn stars. The Noldor, driven by the grief of loss and the fire of their oath, crossed into Middle-earth beneath a sky of unfamiliar stars. The two trees were dead. Valinor lay in darkness, and ahead stretched the broad, wild lands that Morgoth had claimed as his dominion. Thus began the long exile of the Noldor, a tale of triumph and tragedy, of kingdoms rising and falling, and of destinies written in shadow and starlight. For those who followed Fëanor, the journey into Middle-earth was swift. They seized the white ships of the Teleri, taken by bloodshed in Alqualond, and sailed northward around the shores of the world. The sea roared beneath them, cold and unforgiving, but the fire in their hearts drove them on. Fëanor himself commanded the lead ship, his eyes fixed upon the horizon where Morgoth waited. But not all the Noldor were granted ships. Fingolfin, Fingon, Turgon, and the greater part of the host were left behind on the far northern shores of Aman. For in secret and under the cover of night, Fëanor ordered the ships burned upon reaching the northern coast of Middle-earth. Flames soared into the sky, red and furious, consuming the vessels that had carried them from Valinor. As the last mast fell into ash, Fëanor spoke a bitter truth. Let the cowards follow if they can. But the act sealed the doom of his people. For Fingolfin and his followers, there remained only one path. The dreaded Helcaraxe, the grinding ice, a vast, frozen wasteland where the sea met the polar north in jagged cliffs and crushing flows. There, under the pale light of distant stars, the Noldor marched across the shifting ice. Frost bit deep into their skin. The wind howled like a wounded beast. Many perished beneath the treacherous surface, swallowed by freezing waters. Yet they pressed onward, driven by endurance, by kinship, and by a spirit that would not yield. At last they reached the northern coasts of Middle-earth, hardened by suffering, their hearts tempered into steel. Their arrival would shake the fate of kingdoms yet unborn. When Fëanor landed with his sons on the shores of Middle-earth, he wasted no time. He rallied his forces and marched directly upon Angband, believing he could strike Morgoth down before the Dark Lord fully regained his strength. But Morgoth had been preparing. Balrogs rose from the depths of Angband, their whips blazing with fire. And in the shadow of Thangorodrim's dark peaks, the two forces collided in a tumult of flame and fury. Fëanor fought with unmatched brilliance, His anger burned brighter than any forge. His sword cut through the armies of shadow. His presence blazed like a star newly fallen to earth. Yet even the greatest of the Noldor could not stand alone against the host of Morgoth. The Balrogs surrounded him. His sons struggled to break through the enemy lines, but they were too far away. At last, the Lord of the Balrogs, Gothmog, struck him down in flame and iron. Still Fëanor fought. Still he rose. It took 7 Balrogs to bring him to his knees. As his sons gathered around him, Fëanor looked toward Angband with eyes full of fire and sorrow. Do not think you can overthrow him. Not with all the might of the Noldor. The Silmarils are forever beyond your grasp. Then the spirit of Fëanor departed in a burst of flame, too fiery to remain in the physical world. His body turned to ash upon the wind. Thus ended the life of the most brilliant, most tragic of the Noldor. The oath he had sworn, however, lived on, bound to his sons and to the fate of all Middle-earth. While the Noldor struggled and suffered in the northern lands, the Valar labored in sorrow to rekindle the world's light. From the last silver flower of Telperion, they shaped the moon. From the final golden fruit of Laurelin, they crafted the sun. The moon rose first, shimmering across the mountains and seas of Middle-earth. The Sindar gazed upward and trembled, hearing ancient prophecies stir within their hearts. Then came the sun. Blazing with a warmth the world had never known, shadows fled before its dawn. Snow melted, rivers shone with golden fire, and with the rising of the sun and moon, the first age of Middle-earth truly began. The Elves, who had once known only starlight, now beheld the brightening of the world. And the race of men, whom Ilúvatar had shaped in secret, awakened with the dawn of the first morning. A new chapter of Arda unfolded. The Noldor, though scattered and wounded, began to shape realms of their own in the lands of Beleriand. Crossing the grinding ice, Fingolfin and his followers reached Middle-earth with hearts forged through suffering. They marched to the very gates of Angband, striking their shields in defiance. Morgoth trembled, for Fingolfin's arrival marked the beginning of all resistance that would one day shatter his power. His son Fingon, bold and noble, would become a hero of unmatched valor. His deeds would one day echo across valleys and rivers, sung by elves in starlit halls. A dream of a hidden kingdom stirred within him, Gondolin, the secret jewel of the First Age. Fëanor's sons, though burdened by their oath, established strongholds that formed the outer defense of Beleriand. Maedhros, the eldest and proudest, suffered greatly in his capture by Morgoth. But his rescue by Fingon would mark a rare moment of unity between the divided Noldor. In Doriath, Thingol heard the echo of returning kinsfolk and closed his realm, fearing the unrest that followed them from Valinor. Under Melian's protection, Doriath became a sanctuary of peace amid the growing darkness. Thus, Beleriand blossomed into a tapestry of kingdoms and alliances, Hithlum, land of lakes and cold winds. Doriath, guarded by magic. Nargothrond, carved by Finrod Felagund. Gondolin, hidden beneath mountains. The march of Maedhros, stern and vigilant. The Falas, where Círdan's ships waited. Osiriand, land of 7 rivers and green song. Their story had begun, but all knew the peace would not last. Far in the north, beneath the smoke of Thangorodrim, Morgoth brooded over his stolen Silmarils. Their radiance burned him, searing his flesh and filling him with agony. Yet he would not relinquish them. He bound the jewels within an iron crown and wore it day and night, each moment a torment, but also a triumph over the elves he hated. Armies of orcs multiplied in the deep pits of Angband. Wolves and dark spirits answered Morgoth's call. Balrogs prowled beneath the earth like living fire. The First Age, though filled with newfound light, would soon be plunged into shadow once more. War was coming. In these earliest days of the First Age, the lands of Middle-earth lay balanced between hope and ruin. The elves built cities of white stone and green court. Men awoke in the east, gazing in wonder at a dawn they could not understand. The dwarves labored beneath mountains, shaping secrets untouched by the world above. And in hidden forests and rivers, the seeds of tales yet unspoken stirred quietly. But all paths, bright and shadowed, would soon converge in Beleriand. For the Silmarils burned in Morgoth's crown. The oath of Fëanor bound his sons to endless strife. The Valar, distant in the west, watched and wept. And the shadow in the north waited for the hour to strike. The First Age had begun in grief, blossomed into beauty, and now stood upon the threshold of the greatest wars ever to shake the world. Its tales of Beren and Luthien, of Turin Turambar, of Fingolfin's lonely battle beneath the stars, and of Gondolin's rise and fall, waited to unfold like constellations across the night sky. But those stories belonged to other nights, other whispering fires, other hours of rest. For now, the world settles into quiet, breathing softly beneath the newborn sun and moon, as starlight lingers in forgotten glades. Middle-earth sleeps, poised between hope and shadow, and the First Age begins.